He smiled like he owned everything, even me. Every anniversary, he expected more gifts, more money, more control. This year, I decided it was finally time he got exactly what he deserved. I had spent years quietly building my life. On the outside, I looked like the perfect, happy wife. People admired our marriage, but behind closed doors, my husband was a different man entirely. Every word he spoke had an edge. Every smile carried judgment. He constantly reminded me of my place, of what I owed him, and of how little I had done compared to him. Money was always a weapon, and I had learned to keep my feelings locked away. Still, inside, a fire was quietly growing. A fire that no amount of sarcasm, belittling, or arrogance could put out. This year, our anniversary was approaching. I knew exactly what he expected. A lavish gift, one that would make him look important in front of our friends. But I had a different plan. One he would never see coming. For months, I had observed him carefully. I noted the little things, how he bragged about his business successes, how he exaggerated his generosity while secretly hiding debts, how he subtly tried to control my spending. Every lie he told, every manipulation he attempted, became another piece of the puzzle I was quietly assembling. On the surface, I appeared distracted by mundane things, work, home, even the tiniest details of our anniversary plans. I asked questions about what he might like, pretending to care, but inside, I was calculating. Every conversation, every glance, was an opportunity to gather information. I started keeping a journal, writing down incidents that could later prove his true nature. The small lies, the threats, the moments when he showed his greed. I captured it all. No one suspected a thing. Everyone still thought he was the charming, accomplished husband I had married. One evening, as we sat in the living room, he casually mentioned, "I'm expecting something very special this year. Don't disappoint me." His tone was playful, but the message was clear. He wanted a gift that reflected his power, something that showcased me as someone he controlled. I smiled, nodding, pretending to be excited. "Of course, dear. You'll love it," I said, my voice soft, masking the determination underneath. Every fiber of me was focused on the plan. I was patient, calm, and careful, because I knew that revenge had to be precise, not rushed. He laughed, satisfied, and turned his attention to his phone, scrolling through messages. I observed him quietly, noting the arrogance in his posture, the way he expected admiration without effort. He didn't know that the admiration he sought would soon turn into something far more uncomfortable: exposure and humiliation. Over the next few weeks, I meticulously prepared. I visited the bank, gathered necessary documents, and quietly consulted a lawyer friend about how to handle any legal complications. The plan wasn't just about embarrassment, it was about accountability. Every lie he told, every attempt at manipulation, would be revealed in a way that could not be denied. I also paid attention to our social circle. Friends and family thought we were the perfect couple, but I knew that their respect could be shifted with the right revelations. My gift, which seemed harmless on the surface, was designed to be a mirror, showing him exactly how he appeared to the world when his true nature was revealed. Each night, I went over the plan in my mind, imagining his reaction, imagining the disbelief, the shock, the anger. I pictured him opening the envelope, seeing everything he had tried to hide, and feeling powerless. The anticipation built quietly inside me, like a storm waiting to break. And yet, I maintained my composure. I didn't want to be seen as vengeful or impatient. He believed I was distracted, perhaps even naive. That made it all the more satisfying. In his mind, I was still the obedient, loving wife he thought he could control. On the morning of our anniversary, I moved through the house with a serene smile. I made sure the gift looked ordinary, even charming. A beautiful envelope neatly tied, with a card expressing love and gratitude. On the outside, it appeared like the perfect, thoughtful gesture. But inside, it contained everything he had tried to hide: financial records, evidence of lies, proof of manipulation, and a note explaining the truth to anyone who needed to know. I placed it carefully on the table, exactly where he would see it first. He walked in, his eyes lighting up with expectation. "So, the big gift?" he asked, grinning. "Just for you," I said softly, my smile steady, my heart racing with controlled excitement. He reached for the envelope, clearly anticipating delight, unaware that his world was about to shift. And that moment, just before he opened it, felt like the calm before a storm I had been patiently waiting for all these years. The calm before everything changed. After placing the envelope carefully on the table, I watched him move around the house like a king inspecting his palace. Every gesture, every confident smile, reminded me of the arrogance I had tolerated for far too long. He believed he owned not just the home, but me. I sipped my coffee calmly, pretending to read a magazine, while my mind ran over every detail of the plan. Months of careful observation, patience, and quiet preparation had led to this day. It wasn't just about humiliating him, it was about proving to myself that I could reclaim my life, my dignity, and my power. I thought about the little things he had done over the years. The way he tried to control every decision I made, from what I wore to how I spent my money. The way he dismissed my achievements, claiming they were insignificant compared to his success. Every slight, every insult, had been stored in my memory like pieces of evidence waiting for the right moment. The envelope wasn't the only part of the plan. I had also set up a backup, copies of the documents safely stored with a trusted lawyer. If he tried to destroy the evidence, it would still surface. If he tried to deny his actions, the truth would speak for itself. Everything was foolproof. During the week leading up to our anniversary, I subtly dropped hints to friends and family about how much I had been planning for the occasion. He overheard a few comments, and I noticed the flicker of curiosity and a little pride in his eyes. He assumed it was admiration for him, but in reality, it was my way of masking the storm I was about to unleash. At work, I continued my routine as if nothing had changed. I interacted with colleagues, attended meetings, and even joked about the upcoming anniversary. All the while, I quietly double-checked the envelope's contents. Each page, each note, each record was exactly where it needed to be. I smiled inwardly, knowing that the smallest mistake on his part could now be traced and exposed. I also made sure to foreshadow the moment without raising suspicion. I mentioned casually that anniversaries were about honesty and appreciation, subtly planting the idea that this year's gift would be meaningful. He didn't suspect the double meaning behind my words. He never did. The evening before the anniversary, I prepared the setting. The table was set perfectly, candles lit, and soft music playing in the background. The envelope rested where he would immediately notice it. I even arranged the seating so that the gift opening would be in clear view for anyone present. Friends who might join later, family who would notice his reaction. Every detail had a purpose. I rehearsed in my mind how it would unfold. He would open the envelope expecting delight, charm, and perhaps a token of affection. Instead, he would find the truth, a truth so undeniable it would strip him of his smug confidence in front of everyone. I pictured the moment of shock, the confusion, and then the realization. Yet I remained calm. The power of patience had become my ally. For years, I had learned to smile while enduring insults, nod while hiding resentment, and act polite while planning silently. This was my time. The anticipation was almost sweet enough to make me laugh, but I contained it, knowing that timing was everything. Even as I planned, I let him believe he was in control. That evening, he bragged about how he expected a gift that would wow him. I smiled and nodded, pretending to be excited. "You'll love it," I said, keeping my tone light. Inside, I knew he would not love it in the way he imagined. Sleep came fitfully that night. I couldn't stop thinking about the moment he would realize the depth of his exposure. I imagined him reading the documents, seeing the proof of his greed and deceit, and feeling the sting of being outsmarted. Every detail had to be perfect, and I was determined that nothing would go wrong. I also considered the aftermath. I knew there might be anger, accusations, even attempts to manipulate the situation after the fact. But I had planned for that too. Copies of the evidence were secure, my lawyer was aware, and the truth was undeniable. No amount of gaslighting or bluster could undo what was about to happen. By the morning of the anniversary, I felt a strange calm. It wasn't relief, it was readiness. The plan was set. The stage was prepared. The envelope, small and unassuming, held the culmination of months of careful strategy. To him, it was just a gift. To me, it was justice. As he awoke that morning, his confidence was visible. He moved around the house with a casual arrogance, completely unaware that the day would mark the beginning of his downfall. I watched him quietly, noting his gestures, the smugness in his smile, and the sense of entitlement he carried so effortlessly. I took a deep breath and reminded myself, this was not about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about reclaiming my life, asserting my worth, and proving that manipulation, lies, and greed could be confronted. The envelope was merely the instrument. The real victory would be in his reaction, the exposure of his true self, and the realization that I was no longer someone to be controlled. The morning passed slowly, each minute stretching longer as the anticipation built. He continued with his usual routines, checking messages, making calls, occasionally glancing at the envelope with curiosity. I smiled inwardly, knowing that every glance brought him closer to his reckoning. And as the day moved toward evening, when our anniversary celebration would begin, I felt a quiet excitement. The moment of truth was near. Soon the envelope would be opened. Soon the facade would crumble. Soon he would finally understand the power of patience, planning, and quiet determination. I poured a glass of wine, glanced at the envelope once more, and whispered to myself, "It's time." The evening finally arrived. The room was quiet, the table elegantly set, soft candlelight flickering across the polished surface. The envelope sat in the center, looking innocent, almost inviting. To him, it was just another gift, another sign of my affection. To me, it was just as carefully folded into paper. He walked in, wearing a confident grin that made my skin crawl. "So, the big gift?" he asked, eyes gleaming with expectation. I smiled softly, keeping my voice calm. "Just for you," I said, my hands resting casually on the table. Inside, I felt a thrill of anticipation, like the air before a storm. He picked up the envelope, running his fingers over it, unaware of the weight it carried. He tore it open slowly, savoring the moment. I watched his face carefully, analyzing every twitch, every flicker of emotion. He expected delight. He would get shock instead. The first sheet of paper contained neatly organized bank statements and receipts. Evidence of his lies, his hidden debts, and the ways he had tried to manipulate me financially. He glanced at it, a small smirk forming, thinking perhaps I had included something trivial. Then came the letter. It wasn't long, but every word was precise. I described the manipulations, the lies, the subtle ways he had tried to control me. I explained the truth of our finances, the reality of his promises, and the way he had underestimated me. As he read, his confident smirk faltered slightly. He looked up at me, frowning. What is this?" he stammered. I smiled softly. "It's the truth," I said simply. My calm voice, steady and controlled, contrasted sharply with the panic slowly creeping into his eyes. He flipped through more documents, evidence I had gathered over months. Emails, screenshots, records of conversations, proof of his attempts to manipulate our friends and family, all laid out neatly in the envelope. The realization hit him gradually, like a wave breaking against rocks. This can't be real," he muttered, his voice cracking. I watched him, knowing every moment of disbelief was a part of the plan. He had believed he could control everything, including me. Now the illusion was shattering. I leaned back slightly, maintaining composure. "It's real," I said softly. "Everything here shows exactly who you are when you think no one is watching." He froze, looking around as if the walls themselves might confirm my words. I could see the first signs of panic, the way his hands trembled slightly. For years, he had built his confidence on deception, arrogance, and control. Now all of it was crumbling. I had arranged for our closest friends to join later in the evening, casually hinting that they might see something interesting. The anticipation of witnesses added another layer to the plan. He didn't know anyone would see him unravel, but I could almost feel their eyes on us, sensing the tension in the air. Why would you do this?" he asked, his voice wavering between anger and fear. I smiled, calm and collected. "Because you needed to see the truth. Because I needed to show that control isn't power when it's built on lies." He looked at me, disbelief and frustration written across his face. You can't do this," he said, but his voice lacked the conviction it once had. The arrogance that had defined him for so long was fading. I remained silent, letting the evidence speak for itself. Every document, every note, every piece of proof was a hammer striking at the foundation of his ego. For years, he had believed that I was naive, that I would accept his manipulation. Now he realized the mistake he had made. He tried to argue, to dismiss the evidence, to claim some technicality or error. But I had anticipated everything. The documents were flawless, backed up with copies at my lawyer's office. Every claim he could make was already addressed, leaving him powerless. "You should have treated me with respect," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Not tried to control me, not tried to take from me. You underestimated me, and this is the result." His face twisted with a mix of rage and fear. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. For the first time, he realized that I was no longer someone to be manipulated or intimidated. The The power dynamics had shifted entirely. I watched as he absorbed the full weight of the situation. His arrogance had been replaced by panic, his confidence by realization. Every lie, every attempt to control, every manipulation was laid bare before him. And he had no one to blame but himself. Then came the final piece of the envelope, a note addressed to anyone who might ever doubt the situation. It explained everything in simple terms: how he had tried to manipulate me, how he had hidden debts and lied to friends and family, and how the truth had finally been revealed. He read it slowly, the words sinking in like stones dropping into water. The impact was immediate. His face turned pale, his hands shaking slightly. I could see the anger and frustration boiling beneath the surface, but it was too late. The truth had won. I leaned back, sipping my wine, maintaining a calm facade. "I hope you understand now," I said softly. "The gifts you expect, they aren't always what they seem. Sometimes the gift is the truth." He looked at me, speechless, struggling to comprehend the depth of the situation. The plan had worked exactly as intended. Months of preparation, patience, and careful observation had led to this moment. The moment where control, arrogance, and deceit were confronted and defeated. And as he stared at the envelope, realizing that every lie he had told was now exposed, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Not cruelty, not malice, just the calm satisfaction of seeing justice delivered in a way that was clever, precise, and unavoidable. The evening continued, but the energy had shifted. I remained poised, collected, enjoying the subtle tension as he tried to regain composure. Friends and family would eventually notice the change, but for now, it was just him and the envelope, and the undeniable truth it contained. I had planned every detail meticulously. I had anticipated his reactions, his attempts to dismiss the evidence, even his anger. And now, I could see the plan unfolding exactly as I had envisioned. This was not just revenge, it was a lesson in patience, observation, and clever execution. He had believed that control meant power. I had shown him that knowledge, preparation, and calm determination were far stronger. The envelope had done its job. The revelation was complete, and he had only himself to blame. By the time our friends arrived for the anniversary celebration, the atmosphere was calm, almost serene. I had arranged everything perfectly. Drinks, snacks, soft music, it all seemed ordinary. No one would have guessed the storm quietly waiting in the envelope. He was still smirking, oblivious to the web that had been spun around him. Confidence radiated from him as he welcomed our friends, joking about the amazing gift he expected. I smiled politely, hiding the quiet thrill building inside me. The moment was near. I poured wine for everyone, making small talk, letting him bask in the attention, thinking he was admired. He had no idea that the admiration he assumed was about to turn into scrutiny, and that his lies, carefully hidden, were about to be exposed. Finally, I gestured toward the envelope. "Why don't you open your gift now?" I said softly, as if inviting him to enjoy a simple token of love. His eyes lit up, a spark of arrogance in his expression. "Finally," he said. He took the envelope in his hands, slowly tearing it open as everyone watched. I could almost feel the shift in the air, the tension growing thicker, heavier, as if the room knew what was about to happen. The first few pages were benign enough, beautifully printed documents, neatly arranged. But as he scanned them, his expression began to change. His smirk wavered. His confident posture faltered. What is this?" he stammered, his voice tight. I kept my tone soft, calm. "It's everything you've tried to hide," I said. "All the manipulation, lies, and attempts to control me. Every small deceit, every financial trick, it's all here." He flipped through more pages, glancing at the neatly organized evidence. Emails, screenshots, transaction records, even proof of the lies he had told friends and family. All of it laid bare. You can't show these to anyone," he muttered, panic creeping into his voice. "I just did," I said simply. My eyes met his, unwavering. "They're here for everyone to see, just like I promised." His face went pale. I could see the rage bubbling underneath the surface, but it was mixed with fear, confusion, and disbelief. He had believed he controlled the narrative, that no one would ever know the truth. And now, in front of friends and family, the reality of his actions was undeniable. Some of our friends glanced curiously at the documents. I didn't need to say anything. The evidence spoke for itself. The room grew quiet, heavy with tension. His attempts to dismiss or explain only made him look guilty. Why would you do this?" he asked, his voice shaky, almost desperate. "Because the truth needed to be seen. I said calmly. And because I needed you to understand that control built on lies is never real control. He tried to speak again, to argue, to claim some error in the documents. But every point he raised was addressed. I had anticipated every excuse, every attempt at denial. The truth was airtight, undeniable. I watched his hands shake slightly as he continued to leaf through the papers. He tried to maintain composure, tried to salvage the situation, but his arrogance had crumbled. Every lie he had told, every manipulation he had attempted, was now in plain sight. I don't believe this, he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. You can't. You underestimate me, I said quietly. And that was your mistake. At that moment, a close friend who had witnessed his subtle manipulations for years finally spoke up. I had no idea it was this bad, she said, her tone a mix of shock and disappointment. I thought he was just confident. I didn't realize how much he tried to control you. The room was quiet now, all eyes on him. I could feel his humiliation, sharp and bitter, settling like a weight on his shoulders. The smirk he had worn for so long was gone, replaced by a mix of disbelief and fear. He tried one last time to argue, to regain some shred of dignity. You're lying. This isn't true. But the evidence spoke louder than words ever could. The documents, emails, and screenshots left no room for denial. His attempts to manipulate the narrative had failed completely. I remained calm, watching him squirm under the weight of exposure. It wasn't cruelty, it was justice. The envelope, so unassuming, had accomplished exactly what I had planned. Every detail had been considered, every piece of evidence carefully curated. The final part of the envelope, a simple note addressed to anyone reading, explained everything succinctly. It made clear how he had tried to manipulate me, how he had hidden debts, lied to friends and family, and undermined trust. The note wasn't cruel. It was factual, clear, and devastating. He read it slowly, his confidence melting away. The reality of his actions, now visible to everyone, struck him like a hammer. He could feel the judgment of the room, the quiet realization from friends and family that the man they admired was not who they thought he was. You humiliated me, he said, voice trembling with anger and fear. No, I replied softly. You humiliated yourself. I just made sure the truth was seen. The tension in the room was palpable. He tried to protest further, but no one believed him. The calm, collected way I had orchestrated the evening left him exposed and powerless. Every attempt to deny, justify, or manipulate was ineffective. Finally, he slumped into his chair, defeated. The envelope had done its work. Months of patience, observation, and careful planning had culminated in this moment. He had assumed control, but the illusion had shattered. The balance of power had shifted irreversibly. I sipped my wine quietly, letting the moment settle. I had never felt cruel. I had only felt justified. He had underestimated me, dismissed me, and tried to control me. Now, in front of everyone, he was forced to confront the truth. And as he stared at the remaining documents, speechless and exposed, I knew that my revenge had succeeded perfectly. Not through anger, not through rash action, but through patience, intelligence, and careful execution. For the first time in years, he realized that I was no longer someone to be dominated or underestimated. I had reclaimed my dignity, my power, and my voice. The envelope had been just the beginning. The revelation of truth was the real victory. The room was still, the soft candlelight flickering against the walls, casting shadows that seemed to echo the tension in the air. My husband sat frozen, staring at the envelope and its contents as if the words could somehow erase themselves. But they couldn't. The truth was undeniable, and so was his humiliation. I watched him carefully, taking in the disbelief, the anger, and the panic reflected in his eyes. For years, he had believed that control equaled power, that arrogance could mask greed, and that manipulation could shape reality. Now, in front of friends and family, he faced the consequences of every lie, every deceitful action, and every attempt to belittle me. My friends exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the situation. Some were shocked, some were impressed, but all understood that the balance had shifted. For the first time, he was powerless, stripped of his false confidence, and forced to confront the truth he had spent so long hiding. You ruined me, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper, shaking with a mix of fury and fear. No, I said softly, meeting his gaze with calm resolve. You ruined yourself. I just made sure the truth was seen. He tried to argue, to reclaim some control, but the weight of the evidence was overwhelming. Every manipulation, Every financial lie, every attempt to control me had been documented. There was nothing left for him to hide. He was exposed, vulnerable, and for the first time, entirely accountable for his actions. As the evening continued, I spoke briefly with our friends and family, carefully explaining that the envelope had revealed the truth about a situation that had been hidden for too long. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I simply stated the facts. Calm, measured, and powerful. The effect was immediate. People who had once admired him now understood the reality of his character. Some were silent in shock, others offered support to me, and a few quietly expressed regret for not seeing the signs sooner. It wasn't just a personal victory. It was a lesson for everyone present. My husband's face grew pale, the lines of arrogance replaced with lines of fear. He had spent years believing that the world would overlook his actions, that I would remain submissive and silent. But patience and careful planning had tipped the scales. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that underestimating someone quietly plotting their revenge was a dangerous mistake. I took a deep breath, feeling a wave of calm satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge for the sake of anger. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my voice, and my freedom. The envelope was just the tool. The real victory lay in demonstrating that truth, patience, and strategy are more powerful than arrogance, lies, and control. He looked around the room, seeing the subtle but unmistakable shifts in perception. Friends and family who once deferred to his confidence now regarded him with quiet judgment. The realization of public exposure weighed on him heavily. Every attempt to deflect blame or deny the truth was futile. The evidence was airtight. For the first time in years, he was silent. Not out of composure, but out of recognition that he had been outsmarted, outplanned, and revealed. The arrogance that had defined him for so long was gone, replaced by the bitter taste of failure. I finally spoke, softly but firmly. This isn't cruelty. It's accountability. You chose your actions, and now the consequences are clear. I only acted after seeing that honesty and fairness had been ignored for too long. He didn't respond. There were no words left that could undo the damage, no arguments that could reclaim control. The envelope had done its work. My patience, planning, and careful observation had culminated in a moment that would remain etched in our lives forever. I took a sip of wine, letting the silence stretch. The calm after the storm was intoxicating. He had assumed he held all the power, but power built on lies and manipulation is fragile. Patience, intelligence, and truth are far stronger, and tonight they had won. The moral of the story was clear, not just for him, but for everyone present. Underestimating someone, dismissing their intelligence, or attempting to control them through lies will always lead to consequences. True strength comes from patience, observation, and knowing when to act. As the evening drew to a close, I reflected quietly. I had achieved my goal without resorting to unnecessary cruelty. The victory was clean, calculated, and undeniable. He had been confronted with his true self, and I had reclaimed my voice. Later, when the house was quiet and the celebration had ended, I placed the remaining documents in a secure place. The plan had worked perfectly. I had proved that intelligence and patience could outmatch arrogance and deceit, that quiet observation could outmaneuver loud control, and that careful planning could achieve justice without chaos. I looked at him one last time. His eyes, once full of arrogance, now held a mixture of disbelief and humility. He had learned a lesson he would never forget. Respect, honesty, and integrity cannot be ignored or manipulated without consequence. And as I walked away, I whispered to myself, this is what patience and planning can do. This is what it means to reclaim your power quietly and decisively. If I were in this situation, here's what I would have done. I would have stayed calm, collected evidence meticulously, and acted with precision. Revenge isn't about rage. It's about justice, strategy, and ensuring accountability in a way that leaves no doubt. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.